The sea had always been both her home and her prison. For as long as she could remember, Elena had lived by its edge, listening to the whisper of waves that carried secrets no one dared to speak aloud. The coastal village of Marrow Point had been her whole world, until the night it took everything from her. 12 years had passed since that storm. 12 years since the waves rose higher than the cliffs and swallowed her family whole. She was 17 then, too young to understand the cruelty of nature, too old to believe it was simply an accident. Since that night, she had never returned. Until now, the bus rolled through the fog, its headlights cutting through the gray dawn like trembling candles. Elena sat near the window, her fingers pressed against the cold glass, tracing invisible patterns as the coastline appeared, jagged, distant, familiar in the way old wounds are. Her heart pounded with something she couldn't name. Fear, maybe. Or guilt. She told herself she had come back to sell the house, the one her parents left behind, the one that had stood empty all these years, rotting in silence. But deep down, she knew the truth. She wasn't here for the house. She was here for answers. When she stepped off the bus, the wind greeted her like an old enemy. It howled through the narrow streets, carrying the scent of salt and decay. The town hadn't changed much. The same stone cottages, the same leaning lampposts, the same old men sitting outside the harbor tavern, pretending not to stare. Elena Hart, one of them, muttered as she passed. "Didn't think we'd ever see you again." She didn't answer, just kept walking, her boots echoing on the wet cobblestone. Every corner felt haunted, not by ghosts, but by memories. Her mother's laughter, her father's voice calling her in for dinner, her brother's footsteps chasing gulls by the shore. And then, the storm that had come suddenly, faster than anyone could predict. The fishermen said the sea turned black that night, that it screamed as if alive. Her father had gone out to bring her brother home from the lighthouse. Neither returned. The search party found pieces of the boat 2 days later, washed up miles down the coast. No bodies, just wreckage. For years, Elena blamed herself. She was the one who convinced them to stay by the sea. She was the one who didn't warn them when the tide began to rise unnaturally fast. And she was the one who ran, barefoot and terrified, when the lightning hit the cliffs. Now, as she approached the old house, she felt that same storm stirring again, not in the sky, but inside her chest. The front door creaked when she pushed it open. Dust floated through the air like snow. Everything was frozen in time. The worn sofa, the cracked photographs on the wall, her mother's favorite blue vase still on the table. She ran her fingers along the piano keys. The sound that came out was sharp and broken, like the voice of something forgotten. She lit a candle and sat at the old kitchen table. Her reflection shimmered in the window, pale, older, eyes sunken with years of sleepless guilt. That's when she saw the reflection behind her, movement. A shadow slipping past the hallway. Her breath caught. She turned. Nothing. Just the empty hall and the open door of her brother's room. "Elijah?" She whispered, her voice trembling. Silence. Only the waves outside. That night, Elena couldn't sleep. The wind beat against the shutters, and the sea roared louder than she remembered. It almost sounded like voices. She got up, wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, and went outside. The tide was unusually high. The moon hung low, heavy and orange. And there, by the rocks near the shore, she saw it dot a small light. Flickering, faint, like a lantern being carried through the fog. She froze. Nobody should have been there. Not at this hour, not during a storm warning. Yet the light moved closer, weaving between the stones until she could almost make out a shape. "Elijah?" She called again, louder this time. The light stopped, and then, a whisper carried by the wind. "Why did you leave me?" Elena's blood ran cold. The light vanished. She stumbled back toward the house, heart hammering, her breath sharp and uneven. She slammed the door behind her, pressed her back against it, and listened. The sea roared, the wind screamed, and somewhere in that chaos, she thought she heard crying. When morning came, she convinced herself it had been a dream, a trick of exhaustion and grief. But when she walked to the shore again, she found something waiting there, something she hadn't seen in 12 years, that a piece of her father's boat. The same carved initials, EH. She fell to her knees. The wood was smooth, untouched by time, as if it had just been made. That's when she noticed something else. Footprints. Small, barefoot prints leading from the water to the dunes, and they stopped right in front of her. Elena turned slowly toward the sea. The waves were calm now, eerily still, but beneath the surface, something glimmered, something watching. The sea was quieter the next morning, but Elena's mind was not. She hadn't slept, not truly. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the lantern flickering in the fog and heard that whisper again. Why did you leave me? She told herself it wasn't real. It couldn't be. Yet the footprints were still there, etched into the damp sand like a signature from another world. The tide hadn't washed them away as the sun broke through the clouds. Elena wrapped her scarf tighter and walked to the harbor. Maybe someone had been out late that night. A fisherman, a local boy. She needed to believe there was a simple answer. But when she asked around, everyone avoided her gaze. Footprints? Old Mrs. Keegan repeated, frowning as she adjusted the crates of fish. No one's been out there in years, dear. Not since the storm. You shouldn't go near that beach. Why not? Elena asked. Mrs. Keegan hesitated. Because it's not right. Things wash up there that don't belong. Best leave the sea alone. It remembers more than people do. Elena didn't reply. She just turned and walked away, feeling the woman's wary eyes following her until she vanished around the corner. The lighthouse rose at the edge of the cliffs. Just as she remembered, tall, white, chipped by wind and rain. Her brother used to spend hours there, drawing ships in his notebook, dreaming of the day he'd sail beyond the horizon. That notebook was never found. She climbed the rocky path, her boots slipping on the slick stones. When she reached the top, she noticed the door was ajar. She hesitated, then pushed it open. The smell of salt and rust filled her lungs. Inside, the air was heavy. Dust motes floated in the weak sunlight pouring through a cracked window. The spiral staircase groaned under her weight as she climbed. Halfway up, she stopped. There were drawings on the wall, faint, done in charcoal. Waves, boats, a small figure standing on the shore. Her brother's drawings. She ran her fingers over the faded lines. How had they survived? At the top, she found the lantern room. The glass was broken, the mechanism long dead. But there was something new, a small wooden box sitting in the center of the floor. Her name was carved into the lid. Elena stared at it, her throat tightening. Her hands shook as she lifted it. The box was surprisingly light. Inside were three things: a seashell, a torn photograph of her family, and a note written in her brother's uneven handwriting. You promised you wouldn't forget me. The paper trembled in her hands. She felt the world tilt. The air too thin, the sea too loud. Elijah. She whispered that a sound echoed behind her, the creak of the lower door. Someone was in the lighthouse. Elijah? She called, stepping toward the staircase. No answer. She descended slowly, the old iron railing icy beneath her grip. When she reached the bottom, the door swung open on its own. The wind outside howled, carrying faint laughter, a child's laughter, distant and broken. She ran out, scanning the cliffs. Nothing but fog. Elijah. Stop. The laughter stopped. And then, out of the mist, a small figure appeared. Pale, dripping, barefoot, it stood near the edge of the cliff, facing away from her. That Elena's breath hitched. Her mind screamed that it wasn't real, that it couldn't be, but her heart knew that silhouette, that posture, that fragile stillness. Elijah. The boy turned. His eyes were the color of the sea. His skin shimmered faintly, as if light were trapped beneath it. You came back, he said softly. His voice wasn't quite human, layered, echoing, like a memory caught between worlds. Elena stumbled forward, tears burning her eyes. You're not, you can't. Why did you leave me? He asked again. The same question, the same hollow pain. I didn't mean to. She cried. I was a child, Elijah. I tried to find you. But the boy only smiled, a sad, knowing smile. The sea took what it wanted. You survived because it chose to let you go. What does that mean? He looked toward the horizon. The waves darkened, trembling under a rising wind. It's not over, Lena. The storm wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Then the fog closed in around him, swallowing his form like smoke. Elijah. She ran forward, but there was nothing there. Just air, just the sharp edge of the cliff. Her hands clutched at empty space. She fell to her knees, sobbing into the wind. The world blurred. When she finally looked up, she saw something glinting near the rocks below. A locket. She recognized it immediately. Her mother's. She remembered her wearing it the night of the storm, the chain glimmering as lightning flashed. How could it be here? The path down the cliff was steep and slippery, but she didn't hesitate. She needed to know. She needed proof. When she reached the shore, the waves were calm again. The locket lay half buried in the sand. She picked it up. The metal was warm, impossibly warm. She opened it. Inside was a small photograph. Her mother holding Elijah, both smiling. But beneath it, folded tightly, was another note. The sea remembers what you took from it. Elena's hands shook. She looked out at the endless water. What I took, she whispered. And then she remembered. That night, her father yelling for her to run, her mother screaming her name, and the flash of something bright beneath the waves. A shape, a face. Had she seen it before the lightning struck? Or was it just her imagination? The more she thought, the more fragments returned, whispers in the wind. The feeling of being pulled back when she tried to reach her brother, the strange resistance of the tide. Almost as if the water itself had pushed her away. Maybe it had. That night, she stayed in the house again, too shaken to think clearly. She placed the locket on the table, the shell beside it. As she stared, she realized something. The shell was wet, glistening, as though it had just been pulled from the sea. She didn't touch it. Around midnight, she woke to the sound of footsteps upstairs. Slow, measured, creaking the way her father's used to Elijah. She whispered. The footsteps stopped. Her heart pounded. She stood, gripping the candle tightly, and climbed the stairs. The hallway was empty, but her bedroom door was open. Inside, the window was wide, curtains flapping in the cold wind. On the bed, written in seaweed across the blanket, were 3 words. Come to me. The candle trembled in her hand. She backed away slowly, her pulse echoing in her ears. She knew she should leave, take the first bus out, never look back. But something inside her, that same pull that had brought her here, wouldn't let her go. The sea was calling her again. The world around them had quieted, but inside, the storm had only begun. The glass of the hospital window reflected 2 faces, Daniel's hollow eyes, and beside him, the reflection of a woman he thought he'd lost. Claire's chest rose faintly with each shallow breath, her fragile body cocooned in the sterile white sheets. Machines hummed softly, a fragile orchestra keeping her tethered to life. He'd spent weeks here. Nights spent slumped in the chair by her bed, mornings staring blankly at coffee cups gone cold. The doctors had said she might never wake, that even if she did, she might not remember him. But every day he spoke to her. About the weather, about their old apartment with the crooked balcony, about the sound of rain on the tin roof, and how it always made her laugh. Outside, autumn had begun to strip the city bare. Leaves drifted across the pavement like memories refusing to settle. Daniel had grown used to the rhythm, the world moving on while he stayed still. Then, one night, something shifted. Her hand twitched. He thought he imagined it. Another cruel trick of exhaustion. But then her lips parted slightly, a weak breath escaping, and her fingers curled against his. Daniel froze, heart pounding so loud it drowned out the beeping monitors. Claire? He whispered. Her eyelids fluttered, slowly, painfully, until at last, the faintest blue shimmered through. When her gaze found him, confusion clouded it at first, as if he were a stranger in a dream. But then, recognition flickered, faint as a candle. A tear rolled down his cheek before he could stop it. Hey, she murmured, her voice thin but real. You look terrible. He laughed. The sound cracked, raw, disbelieving. Yeah, he said. You've been asleep too long. The days that followed were fragile. Claire's memory came back in fragments, like shards of glass scattered across the floor. She remembered their wedding, but not the accident. The forest, but not the crash. Her father's voice, but not his face. Daniel didn't push. He sat with her, helped her walk again, helped her remember the world. And every night, when she drifted to sleep, he'd watch her and think of everything he never said. All the words he'd buried beneath guilt and fear. Weeks passed before the doctors released her. The hospital doors opened, and for the first time in months, Claire felt the sun on her face. The city smelled of rain and exhaust, alive, loud, familiar. They returned home to the apartment that had waited like a ghost. Dust motes floated through the light as they crossed the threshold. Everything was as they had left it. The chipped mug on the counter, her old sketchbook on the table, the photo of them in the mountains smiling into the wind. She stood in silence for a long moment, tracing her fingers over the cracked picture frame. "It's strange," she said. "It feels like someone else's life." "Maybe it is," Daniel said softly. "Maybe it's a new one." That night, they sat together on the balcony, the same one that used to groan under the weight of summer nights and laughter. The city glimmered below, lights rippling across the river. For a while, neither spoke. Then Claire turned to him, her expression thoughtful. "Do you ever think about what comes next?" He looked out at the skyline, his reflection fading into the glass. "All the time. I don't want to just go back," she said. "Not to who I was. Not to what we were." Daniel nodded slowly. "Then we won't." She smiled faintly. "You make it sound easy." "It's not. But it's possible." The silence that followed wasn't heavy this time. It was full of something new. Not hope, not exactly, but space. A space to rebuild, to begin again. Months turned into seasons. The scar on Claire's temple faded, but the memories of what they'd survived remained etched deeper than any mark. They traveled, small trips at first. The coast, the mountains, places they'd dreamed of visiting but never had in a quiet village by the sea. They rented a cabin for a month. The air smelled of salt and pine. Claire painted again, her hands uncertain at first, but steadier with each stroke. Daniel wrote, not for anyone else this time, but for himself. One evening, as they walked along the beach, Claire stopped. The tide washed over her feet, and she closed her eyes. "I used to dream about drowning," she said quietly. "Every night after the accident. I'd wake up gasping, and I didn't know why." Daniel reached for her hand. "You didn't drown." She shook her head. "No, but part of me did." He didn't know what to say, so he squeezed her hand instead. The wind carried the sound of distant gulls. "Maybe that's the point," she said finally. "Maybe we're supposed to let those parts go." He looked at her, really looked. The faint scar, the small smile, the way the setting sun caught in her hair. She wasn't the same woman he had loved before the crash, and he wasn't the same man. But maybe that was okay. That night, they sat by the fire. The storm rolled in, thunder grumbling far away, rain tapping against the windows. Claire leaned against him, half asleep. "I don't remember everything," she murmured. "But I remember you." He closed his eyes, holding her a little tighter. "That's enough," he said. When morning came, the storm had passed. The world smelled new again. Wet earth, sea air, a promise whispered between waves. Claire woke before dawn. She stood outside, barefoot in the dew, and watched the horizon turn gold. For the first time, she felt no weight pressing against her chest, no ghost pulling her backward. Daniel joined her, his hand brushing hers. They watched in silence as the sun climbed, spilling light across the water. "Feels like the beginning," she said. He smiled. "Maybe it always was." They stayed until the sun was high, until the light erased the shadows. The world stretched out before them, imperfect, unpredictable, alive, and this time they walked into it together.